Hi, my name's Rob Jolliffe, and this is a Sabre Expert Series video on how to select your ERP team to implement your ERP. So this is my video on selecting your ERP team. And once again, I'm Rob Jolliffe. I'm a Microsoft Dynamics Business Central expert, owner of Sabre Limited, experts in Business Central for manufacturing. And let me hit you with a couple of assumptions before we get into this video. I'm going to assume that we're talking about a small project, not an enormous multinational type project. So less than about 100 users. And I would say that you're probably more likely to be in the 50 user range or less, but up to 100 users, this would probably be pretty applicable. And you're a manufacturing company that is looking at doing a project. So let's kind of jump in and take a look at what you should be expecting from your project team to select your project team. So there are two teams that work on your ERP project. One of those teams is theirs team, which is me and my group, and then the your team, which is you and your team. So we're going to talk about you and your team and how to select them. And it's really important to understand that selecting the right team is extremely critical, because if you select the wrong team, you've got this extremely expensive business change process that you're undergoing, and selecting the wrong team is just going to mean disaster for your business. So selecting the right team is extremely important, because an ERP project is a business transformation project. It's not a skills-based training project. It's not like learning how to use a CAD system. I mentioned this in one of my other videos. It's not a skills-based task. It's a transformation, a change management based task. And there's a lot of best practices and implementation and changes to the way you run your business. So extremely important that you choose the right team. It's not skills-based training. I'm repeating that again, and it's not an IT project. So that's one of the things that people really get confused about with ERP. They want to go out and hire like an IT manager to run it, or they want to hire a CIO, a chief information officer, to run their ERP project. That is a waste of your money and your time. It is you're gonna need a CPA much sooner than you're gonna need an IT person for this project. There's very little IT. IT people that I've hired, and I have an IT business as well, they don't understand ERP at all, and they're completely confused by the whole thing. So let's get into the people that you're going to need. You're going to need somebody I call the project lead, and this is not a project manager. So it's very important to distinguish. I personally, in the way we run our projects, a project manager, formal project manager on the customer side, adds a whole layer of overhead and difficulty that is not needed. So how do I know, though, who should be this person? Well, they should be organized. The project lead is somebody who is going to have time to keep on top of all of this stuff. And I take them a little bit outside of the main group. The main group of people are going to be doing tasks. And I mentioned in a previous episode of this that about 40 hours total per week between the group members, especially in the beginning of the project, is normal. The project lead might be a little bit are different than that, because they may only need a couple hours a week if your team is very organized, or they may need a lot of time if the team is really disorganized. And they do not need to be IT experts. It's somewhat helpful if they know IT, but it's not the best. I've had people who are very skilled with IT who've been really bad project leads, and people who have no knowledge of IT at all being fantastic project leads. So I would not recommend that they have to be an IT person. They do have to be good at managing task lists and herding the cats, because the rest of your team who's doing this project, they're probably line managers and people who are really good at getting product out the door and really good at understanding your business, but they're not necessarily the most organized, task-oriented people. And so you need somebody who is really good at keeping them on track and keeping them on task. So the next most important role, and I would actually say the most important role, is somebody called the business analyst. This could be the project lead. The business analyst is going to be the person who is going to satisfy three criteria. So there's three skills or characteristics of a person who's a business analyst that I use to decide if they would be a good business analyst. And to be honest with you, if you are doing business with us, and the person you've chosen is not a good business analyst, we will be having a conversation. So the first thing is they have to be really good with new software. They don't have to be the best in the whole company. They certainly don't have to be a programmer or an IT expert, but they have to be a power user, and they have to be able to learn new software quickly and not be scared of computers and not be scared of software. So sometimes they can be, a line manager that is a working manager within the business. Sometimes they can be somebody a little bit less senior, but they need to be really comfortable with technology. They really need to know your business, except the accounting, because that's coming up. So they have to have a really good understanding of your quote to cash cycle. What is going on, how your estimates are created, how your sales department works, how purchasing, how orders flow through, how purchasing handles it, how the warehouse works, how shipping works. They have to have that, and production, obviously production processes. They don't have to know how to make the materials and the products that you sell. They just need to know what the flow is through your business when orders come in through to the point where they're shipped. Most important of all, the number one characteristic of this person is that the owner / management and all the staff really trust their judgment. That is the most important characteristic. Now, it occasionally happens that you do not have one person on your team that can satisfy these characteristics, and that's okay. But then you have to create like a Siamese twin business analyst. You have to pick two people who between them satisfy this criteria and say, you guys are the business analyst. You have to work together. The business analyst puts more hours in than any of the other people on the project, because the business analyst is going to keep their fingers on all of the different threads that are going on, and they're the tiebreaker. So when we have different team members and they're debating what the right way to do something is, and they can't make their mind up, the business analyst has to understand enough about the overall web of interconnections of the ERP system that they're going to say, for our business, we think this is the right decision. Now, another thing I'm going to say about that, and I'll get into this in more detail in a future session or a future episode, is the business analyst and your entire team do not have to be absolutely right about every decision they make before we go into what we call pilot. Pilot is a series of tests and running scenarios through, and we will detect any problems with your it's like the quality test, basically. It's the QA step of the project. When we get into the pilot portion of the project, that's when everybody's going to test the scenarios that we've set up and configured and see if they really work. The business analyst is the person who made the decision about that setup and about what the correct pattern that you should follow, what best practices your business should follow. If the business analyst got it wrong, it's okay. It's not going to prevent your business from moving forward, because it'll be tested out thoroughly before we move. Okay, the last person of the three main people who you need is the accountant, which is probably your controller. And this is more or less the least important to me, because you should have a person who serves this role, and they should be like pretty obvious. Occasionally you run into companies where you don't have a controller or a person who's a professional accountant. So you have maybe a senior bookkeeper. Sometimes I've run into companies that are pretty small and they don't even have a senior bookkeeper. They have somebody who's really, really junior. If you have that kind of situation, you might need to bring in a CPA or a senior bookkeeper from outside to work on the project. Because if you end up making big mistakes on the accounting side, and accounting is very straightforward because you have to follow GAAP, which is the generally accepted accounting principles. And I know enough how to spell GAAP, and I kind of know the difference between a debit and a credit, but I'm certainly no expert. And my team have some people who are experts, but every business is a little bit different. And what you want to get out of your accounting and how you need it to run is not something that we can make decisions for you. You're going to need to have somebody who can make those decisions, and you need that controller level person. Okay, now let's talk about everybody else who's going to be on your team, because you're going to have a team of more than just 3 people. These are the skills that need to be covered. You need a purchasing or supply chain person. And we're talking about manufacturing. You need somebody who covers the order entry and inside sales side of the business. You need somebody with a production and shipping expertise. And the reason I put production and shipping together is because In most manufacturing companies, the production manager is responsible for getting the product to the shipping department so the shipping department can ship it. So somebody who has that kind of expertise in that side of the flow from orders being sent to the floor to them going out the door, that's probably the same person, except if you have warehousing. So warehousing has a star because some companies are make to stock and the production team releases it to the warehouse takes it to shipping. And so then you're going to need that person to be involved. And then finally, the accounting team. So you're going to need more people from accounting than just the controller. This team should be probably about 5 or 6 people in a typical manufacturing company in the beginning. You don't want to overload the team at first. You don't want to try and put all kinds of people from the organization into that team, because if there's too many people, you actually end up arguing among yourselves about things. And remember, it's a business change project. It's not a skills project. So there are going to be situations where you're going to have different ways to do things. And you might have team members that are not from that department. So they're not in purchasing, for instance, and they have opinions about how purchasing should be done. I have an engineering degree. Don't hold it against me. And I happen to know from being in a lot of projects with a lot of engineers that engineers have opinions. I have a lot of opinions. The engineering department's opinions are not necessarily relevant to the purchasing department's decisions. So don't have people who aren't from that department involved in that decision making. Less is more in this case. So as the project proceeds through the timeline, because you're going to be a little bit worried if you have 40 employees who need to be trained in the system, and I've said that you should only have 6, you're going to be thinking, but what's going to happen to the other 34 employees? Well, they're going to be added gradually during the project until you get close to go live, in which case everybody's going to have their hands in the system. So the idea is that that tight group, they're using the software and moving through all of the processes all the way through until you get to the point where they've tested it and it seems to be working well. Then they bring more people in and show it to them, let them double check it to make sure it's still working. And then once everybody's signed off and said, yeah, this thing's working, then you just basically go down to your line staff and you start showing them how to do their individual tasks and jobs. And that's really easy. Once all the setups and decisions have been made, moving on to the next step is much, much simpler. So just a note, I'm going to do a session just like this one on what the Sabre project steps are and what our timeline looks like. And I'll get into a deeper dive into how those alternate staff members are going to be brought into the project. So for now, thank you very much for watching this video. We're Sabre Limited. If you want to contact us or learn more about us, you can visit www.sabrelimited.com. You can email sales@sabrelimited.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is Rob Jolliffe. Thanks very much. Look forward to hearing from you soon.